Recording. Thank you everybody for joining us. I'm really glad that everybody's here, and we've been hosting at EmpowerEd a series of virtual town hall discussions with the purpose of thinking about both how we're supporting students during the COVID crisis, during a period of virtual and distance learning, but also how we can support them in recovery and make sure that our recovery is just as equitable, and that we actually come out of this in a stronger place. And what we're trying to do is to make sure that we build on. So our teachers created a really incredible teacher-created, educator-created education recovery plan for the district, which pretty comprehensively looks at elements of how we support students during virtual learning and what we want and what teachers really feel like is needed in terms of recovery. And we've been building off that by trying to break it down into how we support different groups of students that are in particular need of support during this time. So we did a town hall recently on supporting students with special needs, students with disabilities, and now we're doing a second town hall for supporting our English language learners. We're going to hear from a lot of perspectives today. What we like to do is try to bring stakeholders together to make sure those creating policy and those enacting it at the school level really hear from a diverse range of perspectives. So you'll hear today from policy experts, from teachers, parents, those with the district and DCPS trying to implement this work, about all of those perspectives on how support is going for students who are learning English as a second language in DC. And we hope that through these presentations and this conversation today, we can all come out with a stronger idea of exactly how to support these students, where the gaps are right now, and what we can do better in the coming months, because we know we're going to be in this situation for a little while, and these students are going to need additional support. So where I'm going to start is with Roxanne Garza from Unidos US.
Sorry, I was on mute there. Thank you, Scott, and thank you for inviting me to join this important town hall today. My name is Roxanne Garza, and I'm the Education Policy Advisor for Unidos US, which is formerly the National Council of La Raza. Unidos US is the largest Latino civil rights and advocacy organization in the country, and we are actively engaging in advocacy to support much-needed relief for schools and communities across the country amidst the COVID-19 crisis, particularly for Latinx students and English learners. Our goal is for all English learners to graduate high school, college, and career ready. And for that to happen, it is critical that ELs do not fall further behind during this health crisis. As the reach of COVID-19 continues to grow, we are seeing increased need for support of English learners that requires additional federal support to help ensure that states and districts have the necessary resources to address the unique needs of English learners. ELs are a large and growing population in our nation's schools, as I'm sure all of you know, and they need specific supports and services for success. About 1 in 10 public school students are English learners, and similarly, about 11% of students in DC are ELs. Nearly 60% of ELs live in households where income levels are less than 185% of the federal poverty line, and nearly 700,000 are dual identified as students with disabilities. And despite what we're seeing is, despite educators' best efforts during this crisis, it is proving difficult to provide high quality online instruction for ELs due to lack of electronic devices, connectivity, digital curricula that is specifically designed for ELs, and teacher training for online instruction. So one example that we've kind of seen in a lot of headlines today is that in Massachusetts, we know that at least 10,000 Boston Public School students do not register as having logged into class this month, suggesting that they could be, what's being termed as a virtual dropout, whose formal education stopped 2 months ago when school shut down. This data is consistent with earlier figures showing that around 22% of students had never logged into a Google Classroom, and that includes 25% of the school system's Black and Latinx students, as well as 21% of white students. This could be because of a variety of things, such as students not having access to technological devices, high-speed internet, or they may just have language barriers that's inhibiting them from gaining the access that they need. The stakes are especially high because English learners risk learning loss on 2 fronts. Without language development help, students progress towards mastering the English language is slowed, and their ability to pick up subjects taught to them in English slows down as well. Before all of this started, ELs were already experiencing significant gaps. According to NAEP in 2019, only 10% of fourth grade ELs were at or above proficient levels in reading and only 16% in math. And in addition to that, 85.3% of students nationwide graduated from high school on time, but the rate was only 68.3% for ELs. In the face of this crisis, many students will experience a significant COVID-19 learning slide on top of the, what we traditionally know as the summer learning loss that will create a snowball effect for students when schools reopen. To further augment what we kind of know based on a lot of polls that we've seen in national data, we recently conducted a poll of Latino adults, which showed that 81% of parents worry about their children falling behind in school. And among those working and schooling from home, 84% have received no technological or financial support, such as a loaner laptop or help paying for internet or cell phone bills. The federal government has passed the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, which is also known as the CARES Act, which provides $30 billion in formula grant funding for governors, state education agencies, and institutions of higher education, which is meant to support schools in mitigating the challenges for students and families during this time. But as we've seen in the past, during hard, challenging economic times, state budgets will likely be cut, and education will be one of the budget items that will likely be deeply impacted. So we know that additional resources are needed now to meet the challenges of distance learning for ELs and to prepare for the increased support EL students will need in the coming school year so that states and districts can improve their planning and interventions, build capacity to address the learning slide, and put ELs on a path to success in the 2020-21 school year. So just to quickly summarize these points in Spanish, I'll just go ahead and do that now. Mi nombre es Roxana Garza y trabajo con Unidos US, anteriormente la National Council de la Raza. Unidos US está empujando al Congreso que tome más acción para dar apoyo adicional a los estudiantes más vulnerables, como los que están aprendiendo inglés, porque ellos están entre los estudiantes que el sistema de educación ya estaba dejando atrás, incluso antes de la pandemia. El alcance del coronavirus continúa creciendo y estamos viendo una mayor necesidad de apoyo para los estudiantes del inglés que requieren un apoyo federal adicional para ayudar y asegurar que los estados y los distritos tengan los recursos necesarios para abordar las necesidades únicas de los estudiantes del inglés. Aproximadamente 1 de cada 10 estudiantes de escuelas públicas son estudiantes que están aprendiendo el inglés. Según nuestros estudios, sabemos que casi 60% de los estudiantes que están aprendiendo inglés viven en hogares donde el nivel de ingreso está por debajo de la línea de pobreza federal, lo cual es importante para entender las barreras que pueden enfrentar en cuanto al acceso de aprendizaje a distancia. Es muy importante reconocer el retraso académico en los estudiantes, especialmente a ellos que necesitan apoyo único, como los estudiantes que están aprendiendo inglés durante la pandemia, pero también anticipando que esto los afecta para el próximo año, no nomás este año. Para seguir su educación a lo básico, los estudiantes necesitan tener computadora, conexión al internet, programas digitales de calidad y apoyo de instrucción de sus maestros. Cuando las escuelas vuelvan a abrir, las escuelas necesitarán tener nuevos planes, nuevas estrategias y una nueva capacidad para compensar el tiempo de aprendizaje perdido, abordar la dispositiva de aprendizaje y poner a los estudiantes en el camino hacia el éxito. Aunque el Congreso ha pasado el Acto CARES para proveer algunos recursos para ayudar a los estudiantes a continuar a su educación en forma de distancia, sabemos que el sistema de educación va a requerir mucho más ayuda para prevenir aún más retraso académico en los estudiantes, especialmente a ellos que necesitan apoyo único, como los estudiantes que están aprendiendo el inglés. Si tienen preguntas, me pueden preguntar cuando tengan el tiempo para para preguntas, pero muchas gracias por ahorita. Scott,
Thank
any?
you so much.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Roxanne. I really appreciate that. And it's really great perspective at the national level, too, about how this is impacting our English language learners. We're going to turn now to the teacher perspective with Scott Minter, who is a teacher here in DC at the Next Step Public Charter School, where students are studying both English as a second language often and also studying for their GED. Scott will also speak in English and then summarize in Spanish. I'll turn it over to him.
Okay, hello everyone. Like Scott said, I am Scott and I'm an ESL teacher. Yeah, I've been at the Next Step Public Charter School in DC for the last 6 years or so. I can personally attest to the fact that there are a lot of obstacles right now for my students. And I just heard the fact, I believe Roxanne said it was 11% ELLs. Our school is unique in that they're all ELLs. We do have a small population of GED students that are native English speakers, but all my students are ESL. So currently this semester, I only have 9 students on my roster as I have an advanced level. We have some level 1 teachers, beginners, and they probably have about 20 to 25 students on their roster. And those teachers, I spoke with one today. She has 22 students on her roster and only 2 are showing the class. I currently have 0 students showing up to my class. Every morning I start out about 9 o'clock in the morning and I give them a few assignments, and sometimes I get responses, sometimes I don't. And it's growing as the trends have shown that the students are just not coming on board. And now we're all worried about how to reconnect, how to communicate, and how to get this next semester done. We work in semesters, but all the public schools, I believe, are in the same situation with what to do with summer school and what to do with the next year. We're looking at what to do with next year, as well as how can we make up for some lost education now. So my students, at first, they struggled with the online concept. A lot of my students have come from come from Central America. Most all of my students are Spanish-speaking Latinos. There are a few in our schools that are not, that come from different countries, in Africa, in Asia, etc. But the majority, I'd say 80 to 90% of my students are Latinos, and they are in my class to learn English as a second language. A lot of them did not have access to internet at home other than their phone. So things like Zoom conferences were a challenge. I had a challenge with my older students, my more experienced students. And so I know my ELL 1 teachers, some of our beginning teachers had a lot of problems. Students are used to coming into school and picking up a textbook. They're not used to turning on a computer, and some of them just said, I'm not going to do this. I don't understand the passwords, the links. I don't know where I'm going. I don't like the camera. You name it. Let's see, some of the other things I was going to mention. Some of the students, obviously, I work in a population of 16 to 24-year-olds. So these students are really out there trying to get jobs right now. Some have lost their jobs. Some have maintained them. Some have found new jobs in grocery stores and whatnot. So education in a time of crisis, as you can imagine, is put on the back burner, is set aside. It's not as important, so to speak. So that's one of the biggest obstacles. How do we get the participation that we need, and how to get the students engaged, involved, and interested, but how to get their basic needs met first is probably the #1 problem, and that's the block for education. Another thing, or should I start in Spanish now? I can kind of summarize that.
Sure.
Bueno, acabo de decir en inglés que básicamente yo trabajo, mi nombre es Scott, como dije, Scott, sorry, and yo trabajo en una escuela que la mayoría de mis estudiantes son inglés como segunda lengua. Están estudiando inglés conmigo, y acabo de decir que la gran mayoría son latinos, y la gran mayoría viene de Centroamérica, y estoy seguro que a veces tiene problemas con cosas en la casa como internet, como pagar la cuenta para todo, la renta, etc. Entonces, básicamente, ¿qué quiero decir? Que el problema #1 será que no tiene ahora interés en estudiar porque están intentando de buscar otro trabajo o mantener el trabajo que ya tiene. Obviamente tengo problemas como los otros maestros, que los estudiantes no tienen mucho ganas de estar enfrente de una máquina. Ellos les extrañan estar con los compañeros en la escuela, les extraña trabajar con libros y escuchar y ver el maestro o la maestra. Y pues sí, es difícil. Ahora yo no tengo ningún estudiante que están regularmente asistiendo a mis clases. Tengo otros maestros en mi escuela, otros maestros que tienen 20 y pico estudiantes y vamos a decir que 2 o 3 en cada grupo están asistiendo, no me sale, que están ahí presentes como muy pocos. Pues, y he escuchado que es la misma cosa en las escuelas charter y las escuelas dual language y bilingüe, etc. Otra cosa que no mencioné.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just really important to get kind of a reality check, right, of where students are, our ability to actually translate this work into a virtual setting for students who have a lot of priorities, who are the essential workers many times doing those jobs already, and now they need that work probably more than ever and are having to take up additional work or find new work at the same time. And so to reach those students is just going to be an incredible challenge in this time. So thanks for that perspective. We're going to hear from a couple parents now who are both going to present in Spanish, and then I'm going to actually end the interpretation for the moment, so everyone can hear Isabella. And Isabella is going to, if Zulma is going to start, and Zulma, if you'll just pause after every few lines there, so Isabella can translate to English. Welcome, Zulma.
Muy buenas tardes a todos. Un placer estar acá con ustedes en esta plataforma. Mi nombre es Zulma Barrera.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here on this platform and be communicating with you. I'm Zulma Barrera.
Soy madre de 3 hijas. Tengo hijas en Czech, en DC Prep y en Bria.
I am a single mother and I have children in Czech, DC Prep, and Bria.
Mi hija de 16 años acaba de venir de El Salvador en noviembre, por lo cual ella agarra clases ELL, las clases de inglés. Tengo la niña de 3er grado que recibe clases de educación especial porque todavía tiene dificultades en la lectura en inglés.
My 16-year-old daughter just arrived in January, and she is receiving ESL classes at her high school. And my 13-year-old daughter receives special education services.
Las soluciones que creo que como que se podrían estar ejemplificando en estos tiempos con esta pandemia. Primero, creo que los maestros necesitan tener un entrenamiento pleno de manipulación de la tecnología, en este caso, como es la plataforma Zoom o cualquier otra plataforma. Así que necesitan entrenamiento para poder manipular y hacer clases más dinámicas y didácticas.
The first thing that I think is really important that needs to happen is that all teachers need to receive training in these digital platforms that they're using to teach students, for example, like Zoom, and how to make really dynamic and interactive lessons on Zoom.
Como segunda prioridad, mientras nuestros maestros están en entrenamiento, creo que lo más fundamental fuera que en ese tiempo los niños ya estén siendo partícipes o estén enrolados ya en un sistema que ya existen. Por ejemplo, hay muchos sistemas de clases virtuales y podrían estarlos añadiendo a estas clases virtuales a estos chicos para que puedan verse beneficiados mientras los maestros están siendo entrenados.
The second priority is to utilize all of these platforms that already exist to have students interact on the platforms while the teachers are receiving professional development. So to not kind of waste this time, but to utilize it and leverage it for more student learning.
En tercer punto, sabemos los materiales didácticos, por ejemplo, para niños pequeños, como un niño de tercer grado necesitan materiales en casa que muchas veces nosotros como padres no los tenemos. Estamos hablando de printer, estamos hablando de otros materiales, ¿no? Etcétera, didácticos que los niños manipulan para poder tener un mejor aprendizaje, cosa que muchos padres carecen de eso y ahorita pues dentro de las casas no los tienen.
The third priority is providing students with manipulatives, especially younger students or students who generally use them in class. Parents don't have these materials at home, or many parents don't, but they're noticing that it's something that they would really find useful in these times.
Entendemos, en mi caso, con una niña de educación especial y otra agarrando clases ELL, es muy complicado para mí estar pendiente de que puedan ellas estar recibiendo la mayor atención. Y obviamente sabemos que estos niños este año escolar se están viendo atrasados con el sistema.
The fourth challenge is having multiple students at home. For example, she has one daughter who receives ELL services and her other daughter receives special education services. She's finding it really challenging to kind of manage that in the home. But also she's just worried that so much time has been lost and that there's a lot of learning loss happening at the moment.
Así que también creo que los padres deberíamos estar teniendo entrenamientos virtuales para poder tener un mejor desarrollo en lo que queda de esta pandemia. Y obviamente tener que planificar un plan específico para el próximo siguiente año, qué va a pasar con estos niños y cómo van a ser desarrollados en sus clases.
And also she thinks it would be useful for parents to have opportunities to do learning through all of these virtual platforms in specific areas that they find to be useful in this time. But she also thinks it's really important for there to be a really solid plan in place before students go back to school.
Bueno, creo que eso sería la participación. Ha sido para mí, en conclusión, muy difícil toda esta situación y es preocupante también saber en qué posición van a quedar mis hijas del otro año y saber de que queremos que también que las metas que teníamos para este año no se van a cumplir. Entonces, ¿cómo podemos ayudar a estos niños para acelerar ese proceso? Porque la verdad, se están viendo sumamente atrasados, más que todos los niños con educación especial, porque de por sí ya tenían un problema existente, y también con estos chicos que vienen de un país prácticamente a veces a repetir un grado y ahora pues nuevamente se va a repetir otra vez este mismo grado. Creo que toda esta frustración como padres la sentimos y tenemos que ponerle el extra de la situación económica en la que estamos pasando también. Así que creo que es muy difícil para las familias en estos momentos todo lo que está pasando. Y muchas gracias por escucharme.
So to conclude, this has been a really challenging time. The biggest worry is just how much learning loss is happening, and that she's seeing a lot of learning loss happening with her kids, specifically her child that receives special education services and the child that recently arrived. She's wondering, like, what are we going to do? And like, what are we going to do when schools reopen so that we can accelerate student learning, because now it's not just enough to come back to school, but to actually have a plan in place that will accelerate student learning. And on top of all these challenges, we have to think about the economic situation and how it's affecting families. And that just adds a whole other layer to this that makes it really hard. And particularly participation in distance learning right now is really hard. And she also wants to thank everybody for listening. Gracias, Zulma.
Gracias, Zulma. Thank you, Zulma. And I really appreciate how you shared how all these things can happen at the same time for parents, that you have a student who's an English language learner and another student who's also receiving special education services. And when these things happen at the same time, can compound those inequities. So gracias por compartir también cómo los padres pueden experimentar cómo esto puede pasar a la misma vez, que tiene un estudiante que es como inglés como segundo idioma y también tiene un estudiante que está recibiendo servicios de educación especial, etc. We're going to now hear from one more parent, Lady Johanna Mendez, and then we'll hear the district perspective and open it up for conversation. So, Lady.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Lady Méndez. Soy mamá de 2 hijos, uno niño de 5 años y mi otro hijo de 3 años. Mi primer hijo está en una escuela Montessori, Capitol Hill Montessori. Mi segundo hijo está en un daycare. Digamos que mi primer hijo que está en la escuela, creo que fue una situación un poco frustrante para mí porque en la escuela de mi hijo de 5 años no hay personal que habla español, no es una escuela bilingüe. Entonces, la población estudiantil es muy escasa.
Lady, te voy a traducir ahí antes de que continúes para que no se me olvide.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Lady Mendez, and I am a mother of 2 boys. One is a 4-year-old in a Montessori bilingual school. ¿Y tu otro hijo cuántos años?
Tiene 3 años, pero la escuela no es bilingüe.
And the other
Solo
student is
Montessori.
3, but that's the one that's in a Montessori school that is not bilingual. And so she was just starting to talk about how challenging that was.
Fue muy confuso para mi hijo el primer año escolar porque nadie en la escuela manejaba el español, pero su profesora lo hablaba muy poco. Entonces fue un poco frustrante para el niño el primer año.
It was really frustrating for him his first year at this school because there wasn't any personnel that spoke Spanish. His teacher spoke a little bit of Spanish, but it really wasn't enough to communicate well, and so that was really frustrating.
La otra situación es que era la metodología Montessori y para él esta metodología era muy nueva, así que durante el primer año escolar el niño no quería estar en el salón y no le gustaba aprender de otras actividades dentro del salón.
Another challenge is that Montessori schools have a different methodology, and this was new and different for the student, and he had a hard time adapting to it in the first year. He wasn't used to it.
Para mí fue un reto porque sé que en este país tenemos que hablar inglés, así que tuve que aprender inglés lo más rápido posible para poder entenderme con la directora o con la secretaria o con cualquier persona que trabajara en la escuela.
And I know that in this country, knowing English is everything and gives you access to so much. And so I knew that in that first year, I would have to learn English in order to be able to talk to the principal or really to talk to any staff at the school.
También me tocaba recurrir a intérpretes para que me ayudaran a hablar en inglés, a hablar con la directora, porque en la escuela no manejan personal que habla español. Y también manifesté la pregunta a la directora de por qué no hay tanta población hispana.
I had to use interpreters in order to communicate with staff because there, as I said, there were no Spanish speaking personnel at the school. And I also had to ask, like, why is the Hispanic population so low at the school?
Creo que entendí en su momento que la escuela tenía una falencia en no recibir tanta población hispana, pero querían cambiar ese sistema.
From what I understood, the school had a tendency to not really enroll too many Hispanic kids, but according to the principal, she was wanting to change that.
Así que como sugerencia o solución, creo que es muy importante que nos den la oportunidad a la población hispana de participar más de estas escuelas y que tengan mucho más personal que puedan apoyarnos en el idioma español.
As a result of this experience, I really realized how important it is for schools to really think about having Spanish-speaking personnel, not just to communicate, but so that their voices can be heard.
Por último, la metodología Montessori es muy diferente a la tradicional y creo que como padre de familia también me siento frustrada porque necesito el apoyo para este tipo de manejar este tipo de metodología en casa.
And finally, the Montessori sort of philosophy or methodology is very different from traditional schools. And that's not just difficult for kids to adapt to, but it's difficult for parents. And parents also need either some training or development and understanding how this methodology works.
Gracias a todos por escuchar.
Thank you for listening, everyone. Gracias, Lady.
All right, so the rest of our meeting, we're going to be, for time, in English. And if you would like to listen in Spanish, Isabella will be doing simultaneous interpretation. So there's now a button that should be available to folks to click on interpretation to Spanish on your Zoom page. And you can click over to that if you'd like to listen to that in Spanish as we share. One more person to share. I'm going to introduce Erica Perriera, who's the manager of English as a second language education for DC Public Schools.
Hi, everyone. Do you mind putting my slide up?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I'm so excited because I see a lot of DCPS teachers here in the town hall, so I'm glad you guys are all here. And I have to say a lot of the information I'm going to share is related to the share out sessions we held at the end of April. So a lot of your ideas were included in this. I'm going to talk about some of the challenges and opportunities that we've been facing and that we will continue to face. Obviously, I'm not going to share the total amount of challenges and opportunities, but hopefully just highlight a couple in each category. So I'm going to just start with the digital learning. So some of the challenges, obviously, like I've heard Ms. Garza and Ms. Barrera talk about, was just the lack of access to tech and internet. We would see this across the district, specifically hitting hard our elementary schools and our schools with high English language learner populations. Then related to that, obviously, is just the familiarity with the tech and the internet. So the families not feeling comfortable with using the tech if they do have it. And then going along with that is just the digital overload, the overload of online learning. I think it's a fatigue that sits in with a lot of students, a lot of families. If they are able to access the digital platforms, it's just too much sometimes for everyone. And then also related to digital learning and is just digital literacy. And we've had a lot of teachers talk to us about, especially with their English language learners who might have had interrupted schooling or not access to technology prior to coming to this country, needing to know all the literacy involved with using technology for their daily learning now. So that's been a huge challenge. An opportunity, though, has been the individualized learning that digital platforms provide for our English language learners. So there's ways that teachers can really hone in on what the students need to be working on, which in the regular school year, they may not have the opportunity to do that in the same way. And then also, I've heard from a lot of teachers, as much as it's been a huge learning curve, it's been a great opportunity for teachers to learn about the digital platforms, to learn about all the different tools they can use to work with their students. And then even once, hopefully at some point, maybe the digital learning will be over or we'll be doing it less and going back to our traditional learning style. I've heard many teachers say that they would hope to be continuing to use those digital tools that they learned or they've been learning during this time. Moving on to language instruction, some of the challenges of language instruction have been adhering to English language service hours. As we know, again, if students are not having access to technology or, the schedules are hard because they have multiple people in the house using the technology, it's hard to get in touch with your students and use and adhere to the hours that they really need to improve their language skills. So that's been a big challenge for our teachers and our schools and our students. And also just in general, balancing the English language development needs with the grade level content needs. One of the biggest things we stress, specifically in DC Public Schools, but I'm sure in all our schools around the country, is access to grade level content. But now that the time the students have for learning is shortened, how do we balance out English language development and grade level content, or how do we merge them in a more appropriate way? Some of the opportunities for language instruction, again, just echoing what we've had many teachers say, is that they've been able to actually have more one-on-one time with students. So it's provided them opportunities to just check in with students on a one-on-one basis and have more time for the students to complete assignments. As we know, there's a big crunch on time during the school day. And so when teachers cannot, or when the students don't finish the assignments, it can lead to a lot of frustration. But now that they have some opportunity to spend an extra day or just extra time, it's very helpful. It has been helpful for language instruction. On to teacher collaboration. So a big challenge has been, just like sometimes during the regular school year, the regular school system, is just the clear expectations on how teachers should be collaborating. This can often be a gray area for all our gen ed teachers and our ESL teachers, and it's just compounded by the current distance learning that we're going through. So it's not just knowing how we should collaborate with each other. We found that has been a big challenge. And then obviously the teachers not having the time to collaborate. That's always an issue for our teachers, and especially now when we're working from home. Some of us are balancing families and working. So it becomes very hard to find the time to collaborate with other teachers to support our ELLs appropriately. But the opportunity in that, in the teacher collaboration, is being able to utilize some of the collaboration tools, whether it be for DCPS, Teams, or Google Drives, just different resources to enhance collaboration amongst the gen ed teachers and the English language learning teachers. Going on to social emotional support. Big challenge is obviously the frustration our students and our families are feeling. So they're confined. This is a whole new style of learning, technology not working or not having access to technology, lack of interaction with your peers. And these are all things I've heard our previous presenters talk about. So just in general, the frustration level with our students and how we're addressing that, that becomes a very important challenge for us. And also, on a more serious note is the fact that, as teachers, we're mandated reporters, right? So if there's any type of abuse or neglect or something happening in the house, oftentimes that comes out in school and with your teacher and people you trust. And we don't have the access to our students in the way we did before. So that is a big, big challenge for our students and families and teachers. An opportunity in terms of social emotional support has been the focus is not solely on academics. And I think we talk about that a lot, about social emotional learning with our students. But in reality, because our curriculum and our instructional day is so packed, we don't necessarily get the time to focus on that. So we've heard from many teachers that through distance learning, because there's such a focus on how our family's doing, are they okay? Is everyone being fed? There's moments that we really need to talk to these families. And this type of learning right now that we're going through with COVID-19 is allowing our teachers to do that and to focus on that. Moving on to family engagement. So obviously family engagement has been very difficult. We talked about, I think earlier, Ms. Garza spoke about that and not being able to reach families. So there's so many students we're not able to reach. That's a huge challenge that schools and teachers have been facing. How are we connecting with our families? And especially then if we are connecting with our families, how are we connecting them to essential services, especially for undocumented families? Because there's a lot of services that the city has opened up for many families during COVID, but oftentimes it's not applying to our undocumented families who are in desperate need of essential services. And so that has become a big issue as well, a big challenge, is the communication with the families. And we've heard from many teachers that oftentimes, not always, that the communication with our English learner families falls onto the ESL teacher, while obviously the gen ed teacher has a lot of students to think about and talk about and work with. Oftentimes the ESL teacher is now taking on more of a role of like almost a social worker or a counselor and trying to communicate with these families and work with them. So that continues to be a challenge. Of course, the opportunity is in just the fact that, again, similar to social emotional learning and support, we're putting family engagement in the forefront. We have now schools that are tracking every interaction they're having with family, which we hadn't done, or many schools don't do on a normal basis, in a normal situation. So I think the fact that we are putting in the forefront has been a positive and an opportunity through this learning. And also just the push for better access to translation. I know Ms. Mendez talked about that, just having to use interpretation services, and the fact that we need to do better for our families, or our linguistically and culturally diverse families, and accessing them to information in the language that they speak. And I'll just end very briefly on the reopening of schools. Right now, I think all the previous points I touched upon are going to come into play as we think about and as we plan for the reopening of schools. And I think for English language learners, we know that the best way for them to learn is through that personal interaction, working with a teacher one-on-one, or a small group social interaction. But unfortunately, if we are opening schools and we're not allowed, or we will be doing distance learning or a hybrid of distance learning and in-person learning, it's going to be a challenge for our students who need to continue to work on their English language. So that continues to be a huge challenge. And then another challenge is just intentionally planning for all the previous components that we talked about. So each one of those: digital learning, language instruction, teacher collaboration, social emotional support, and family engagement. When we started this process back in March, we kind of we were just thrown into it. So now the challenge is to how can we intentionally plan for these? And I think the opportunity is just in that, is that how we reevaluate what we've been doing for the past 2.5 months, taking the time over the summer to really plan for that. I know the DCPS teachers are probably super excited about their PD week next week and the next 2 weeks, which I'm sure you all are very fatigued and it's not that exciting for you. We know that it is important. It's going to be an important moment to kind of step back and reevaluate and see how we can do better for our students, specifically our English language learners, starting in fall. So thank you very much. Sorry, Ms. Sanchez, Isabella, I was probably talking too fast, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Erica.
Yeah.
And thank you for everyone for sharing all of those rich perspectives from the different, from all of your perspectives and how you support our ELL students. I want to give folks a chance to get in the last several minutes of our conversation. One thing I want to do to make sure everybody can interact a little bit is I'm going to launch a poll, and I want to see if everybody can see this now, on a few key questions here about supporting our English language learners. Can you give a thumbs up if you can see it? It's now active. Awesome. Okay, so I'll ask everyone to take this poll as we have a few people share. So should ELL students be prioritized for returning physically to school if only some students may return, which we anticipate? Would you send your own child back in person if there's no vaccine yet, but groups are limited and they're taking precautions? And then finally, if you're part of a school community, to what degree has distance learning and school communication since March been accessible in all students' native languages? So we just want to get a kind of a pulse check from a bunch of different school communities that are represented in this group. If you would like to get in on the conversation in the next few minutes, just place that in the chat. And I know LaJoy wanted to share something with Zulma, so I'll go ahead and turn it over to LaJoy.
Thanks, Scott. Can you guys hear me okay? Yes, okay. Hey, Ms. Zulma, is the interpreter on?
Yes, so she's going to stay doing Spanish while you speaking English.
Oh, okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure. Okay. Hey, Ms. Zulma, so lovely to meet you. I know you said you had a child that has a disability and is a ELL student, and I know you were talking about services and time missed. I just wanted to make sure that talk to the IEP team about services missed and come up with a distance learning plan for now. And when you all get back to school, have it's called Comp Ed, have a Comp Ed, compensatory education conversation with the IEP team, because your child may be eligible for Comp Ed services. And to make sure, I'm sorry, you guys, this thing is dinging, and to make sure that everything they give you is in your native language, which is Spanish. And if they don't, you can reach out to us at AJE if you need assistance. We have a bilingual parent advocate there. I just wanted to make sure she had that information. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, LaJoy, and I appreciate that connection here with special education and our English language learners. Zulma, did you want to say anything? And I can translate back to English if you want to share.
Sí, bueno, muchas gracias por esa información. Creo que es precisamente lo que estamos buscando. Estamos buscando que nuestros niños puedan tener el acceso a la tecnología. Es más, yo creo que ya vengo abogando por mi hija, pidiéndoles que si hay extra programas en el internet para que ella pueda acceder a esas websites, porque a veces hay que pagarlas, pero muchas veces no te dan, se van por Cleveland, que son, ¿cómo se dice?, páginas que ya son existentes. Entonces yo creo que no, que los niños necesitan ponerse al día para no estar retrasados, y para eso necesitan tener lo mejor de lo mejor para poder avanzar. Así que yo creo que es una buena oportunidad de aprovechar esta tecnología para que nuestros niños puedan tener ese acceso, pero creo que sí, vamos a tener que abogar por eso.
She was saying thank you, and that's exactly what she's trying to advocate for with her students. And that it's really important that, especially with the technology, that they have access to the absolute best materials that are available, so they can really take advantage of digital learning. And thank you, and she needs to continue to advocate for exactly that.
Thank you.
Anyone else who would like to get into the conversation, feel free to jump in. So we just want to kind of continue on that theme of opportunities and challenges. So if a few other folks have something to share about what opportunities we have because of this moment that we're in to support our English language learners better, and then also what challenges we're seeing. Anyone else?
Hey everyone. Oh, sorry. So I think a challenge that I'm thinking of a lot is thinking about just like accountability. So I am an ESL teacher at Central City Public Charter School, and I'm thinking just how will teachers be accountable for the teaching throughout next year? I think everything is up in the air in terms of whether it be thinking a lot about just like how will we make sure that I just feel like our ESL students that they'll be taught, you know, things like Eureka, things like reading, things like science social studies. I think typically in a traditional school day, you know, everything's pretty jam-packed. It's usually go from like math to reading to recess to lunch. But now we have this opportunity and kind of a challenge, and how are we going to teach all these subjects and making sure that kids are learning these subjects on a daily basis. And so, you know, whether that means we have to radically change our schedules, whether that means that, you know, some teachers like may have to be on like office hours some more couple of days a week. I'm thinking myself like I may have to like, you know, like be available in the evenings or on weekends just because just to be able to make sure that I can connect to like my parents and students in a way. Yeah, so I mean, I think to me that's on like my mind, and hopefully other teachers can agree to, thinking like how we can be held accountable, you know, and making sure that the students are being taught this content, considering that there are even more obstacles in place for our students.
Thank you, James. Anyone else want to share? I know that we also have both several ESL managers coordinators at their schools, and we also have some school leaders. Not to put you on the spot, but if anybody wants to share from that perspective, feel free to jump in.
Hi, my name's Shelley Gray, principal at LaSalle. How are you?
Great, thank you.
From a school leader's perspective, I did want to start with the opportunities. I think one of the biggest opportunities that we have realized is we've had to be really creative with the connections with our families. And I say that in the sense that we have often relied on the traditional approach to communicating with our families and learning about or developing relationships. The relationships with some of our families have become that much stronger because we've had to navigate so many different things together. And I think it's been an opportunity for our school. We have been at an advantage of having several members of our staff that are bilingual. And so we have also utilized each other to learn to lean on each other to communicate with our families. I will say there have been quite a few challenges, though, that we've been faced with, some that we have also been able to start to work through, some that we still have not quite figured out. And I'm okay with that right now, because as long as we keep pushing forward, I think we'll come to some resolve. But I know, and I'm going to speak to this not just from, I know right now, oftentimes we're in a platform where we're speaking and translating only in Spanish, but that has also been one of our biggest challenges. So we have an increasing Amharic community, speaking community. And so oftentimes what we have found is actually we were able to provide more support to our Spanish speaking community and not to our Amharic and French speaking communities. And that is not due to the lack of effort, it's the lack of our resource there, and to our ability then to be able to navigate that. I also have learned myself quite a bit being through our distribution that we struggled a lot. We learned that we have more and more of our general community that is functionally literate or illiterate. And so when we have been trying to the reality is the rate that we had to respond and the amount of information and resources that we had to get out was overwhelming. And for families and adults that are functionally literate and learning a language at the same time, it became very overwhelming. So we had to take a step back and also provide some support where it's bite-sized. We've learned to use videos, how-tos, use some of the strategies that we would use with our children, with adults. And so that has also been an opportunity for us, but quite a barrier at times. And then finally, I would just like to say from an instructional standpoint, one of the, it's been both an opportunity, but also a barrier. The resources, DCPS has done a wonderful job providing some resources for our newcomers and being able to respond to that quickly. As a district though, because we use so many different resources and we have so many children that have, or families that have children in multiple schools, when one school is using one set of resources and another school is using another set, it was very difficult for parents to be able to help their children at home because we had not normed what that looks like district-wide. And so I think for a lesson learned, you know, one of the things that we did start doing was to norm the resources that we were going to use. We all use the same platform. We all use the same digital tools. And once we started doing that, we were able to increase our engagement at the school level with our students and families.
Thank you so much. That's really great. I'm really glad we got to have the principal perspective in there. So thank you, Principal Gray, for being here and for sharing all of that. So I want to share, I'm sharing a few links on the side. I'm just going to wrap up in a couple minutes and talk a little bit about what EmpowerEd is doing on all of this work and how you can help get involved in advocacy. So the first thing I want to share is that we have our major effort this year has been a Latinx Educators Presente campaign. And what that campaign has been about is advocating for something that one of our parents shared specifically was a challenge, was not having Spanish-speaking personnel or Latino personnel in their schools. And that's just incredibly important. And so it's really important for us to recruit and retain more Latino and Latina teachers for our students in the district, as well as those who speak other languages. And thank you for calling out helping our Amharic-speaking community, our French-speaking community, African, Asian, and other immigrants from around the world in DC. So that's something we want to focus more specifically on as well. There's a link there if you are able to donate to give to undocumented immigrants who are not able to receive the stimulus check, and they're really in need, and so you're able to give through that link that I put in there, the GoFundMe. If you want to join our Latinx Educators Presente campaign, that first link there, the survey link, will allow you to sign up to be part of that, so you can keep up to date for how we're advocating for more Latino educators and Spanish-speaking educators in the district to serve our students. We also have a page, it's weareempowered.org/corona, to look for resources entirely in Spanish about the virus itself, health information, where you can get meals, we can distance learning resources, learning tools in Spanish, compiling all that Spanish language resources into one place. You can check that out on our website there. As part of this effort, I want to call out just a few things we've been advocating for. One is visa support for teachers. For us to recruit and retain more Latina teachers, we need funding for visas. That's something that currently schools have to pay out of their own budget. We want to make sure that DCPS begins to pay those visa costs, and that we can have a central organization like ASI, for example, to pay that in the future so we can include our charter schools as well. So that's something we're pushing for, and you can contact the chancellor, DCPS officials, the state superintendent to advocate for that. We also want to push DCPS and the state superintendent's office to have Spanish-speaking staff to guide potential teachers through that recruitment process, certification process, obtaining their licensure, and navigating the visa process. So that's really important, is adding those staff people there. And we also want to as a more systemic solution for our undocumented community, please advocate to Chairman Mendelson on the council, to Mayor Bowser, to the rest of the city council, to extend unemployment-like benefits to our undocumented community. We know, as so many shared, people are having to work. These are essential workers already. It's doubly hard right now given this crisis, and for them to be able to focus on school is incredibly difficult. It would be all that much easier if they were receiving government aid like citizens are. And so we really believe that community desperately needs and deserves aid from our city government. And so we ask you reach out to the DC Council, to the mayor and others, and ask for undocumented community to be included in that way. And so I want to close out and just say, we'd really like to have you involved in our ongoing efforts to support English language learners in DC, and to continue conversations, not just about, like Principal Gray said, our Spanish-speaking learners, but about all of our immigrant communities here and how we can better support them, and how we think about making sure that not just we're supporting them right now in how they access technology and getting them devices and making sure they can get onto an online learning platform, but how we make sure that recovery is more equitable by focusing specifically on students like our English language learners, like our students with disabilities, so we can make sure we are specifically looking out for them in this time. And just to look at that poll before we close out, 63% said they think ELL students should be prioritized. Almost all said yes or not sure. There's a lot of uncertainty about whether you might send your own kids back, so people are really looking to see what those plans are from the city about how this is going to work, not just what the phases are, which has been announced in some way, but what does this look like when students go back? Who gets prioritized? How many days do kids go? And do we consider parents and families as we do that work? And do we have parents and teachers and others at the table and students at the table when we make those decisions? And finally, to what extent has distance learning been accessible? Those results are all over the map, which illustrates how important it is for us to continue this conversation. So thank you so much for being part of the conversation today. Please sign up for the Latinx Educators Presente Coalition so you can continue to follow us and keep in touch about future webinars so we can make sure we have a just recovery all together. Thank you so much, everyone. Isabella, you can speak now.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your participation.
Thanks, all. Bye-bye.